From cozy living rooms to buzzing bookstores, book clubs have long been spaces for connection, reflection, and the occasional passionate debate. In this special mini-series of On the Table with Ashley, we're exploring the world of book clubs, how they begin, what keeps them going, and the surprising ways they foster community and connection over time. We've selected 3 long-term book club members to share their expertise, and we'll be learning alongside you about what makes a book club thrive. Whether you're part of a long-standing group or dreaming of starting one, we hope these conversations offer a bit of guidance, inspiration, and the reminder that at its core, reading is all about connection. This is episode 1 with Hugh Williamson. Enjoy.
Hugh, thank you so much for joining me. It was such a pleasure to spend some time in your beautiful home in Denver. And you were telling me about a book club that you've been part of for a very, very long time. And I felt like so many people struggle to have a meaningful book club, and it would be amazing for people to hear from you about it. But before we jump into that, I always like to start hearing where you grew up and what kind of kid you were when you were young.
I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then Oak Ridge. My dad was in the Corps of Engineers involved in the Manhattan Project. And then we moved to Mobile, where I graduated from high school. What kind of a kid was I? I was always the biggest in my class. I'm a very competitive person, probably overly competitive, reasonable intelligence, and outgoing.
And do you have siblings?
I have one brother who is 17 months younger than I, that we're still very close. In fact, he's coming out here in 2 weeks.
And what kind of mischief did you two get into when you were younger?
Well, I try not to get into trouble. So, basically at 83, I'm just trying to stay vertical. For some reason, I don't remember this, but my brother has scars in his head where he said I hit him with rocks. So at Christmas, we'd always get Roman candles. And instead of firing them like you're supposed to, we would have fights with the Roman candles. I was always much bigger, so we never really got into fist fights or anything like that.
Okay, well, tell us what drew you to join or start your book club.
Probably the most important thing is I've always been a reader. I grew up before TV, so I was reading constantly. I'd go to the local library, which was only a couple of blocks from my house, and take out a half a dozen books, mostly either the Hardy Boys or something like that, or books on sports. So I read constantly and still do. And of course, as I got more and more in business, almost I would say 2/3 of what I read or 3/4 were books having to do with the businesses I was in or trying to get in or self-improvement or so forth. But what really capped it off is we were having dinner one night with a couple friends of ours. This was in 97, and our wives were both in a book club. And as we were listening to them talk about their book club, the other gentleman who had 2 PhDs, was a professor at Notre Dame, and then when I met him, he was a psychologist dealing primarily with Vietnam vets. But he said, "Why don't you and I start a book club?" And I said, "Great. What are we going to do?" And he said, "Well, I just think we'll have a book club." So I said, "Well, let's do this. Why don't you pick 5 people that you don't deal with professionally, and I'll pick 5 that I don't deal with professionally. And that'll give us 12 people, and we will start a book club." And as we progressed, I suggested we'd meet once a month. Each person would take 1 month, and that person would be responsible for choosing the book. He had to read the book before he could choose the book for the book club. And then we would meet. The person that was hosting would have wine and maybe cheese and fruit or something. So because I'd been dealing primarily with business people, I just moved here to Denver 4 years previous. I picked an architect, an HR manager for one of the major accounting firms, the CEO of the largest hospital here in Denver, Everyone was a manager or CEO of some business or whatever. We had no shrinking violence in the group. The only rules were you had to have read the book, you chose the book, you came prepared to lead a discussion, and you were responsible for making sure that the members all had an opportunity to speak and so forth, facilitate a good meeting, which most of us did. We had some fallout the first year because a lot of people just couldn't commit to that. Second Tuesday was when we met. They couldn't commit to being there, and more importantly, they couldn't commit to have read the book. So we had some fallout. We didn't have to kick anybody out. The people that weren't doing what they should have done were gracious enough to leave the book club. So the thing has evolved. That was 28 years ago. We've had 4 people die. After the first year, we've never had anybody join the book club and then quit. So the group we have, which we met last night, as a matter of fact, been together for a long time, and we're great friends. You read all this about men not having good close friends, and this person said, we're very blessed in that if we had a major issue that we needed help with of any kind, health or legal or marriage or whatever, we have 11 people that we can call and get a concerned person on the line and talk about it or meet with. So that basically, says a lot right there.
It sure does. And I think, one of the questions I have is, why do people seek out a good and meaningful book club? I think community is one, and intellectual curiosity is obviously another. It sounds like you get both out of your book club. I remember that you told me you did set a rule on the page count. I think perhaps in the beginning, people chose books that were too long to read in a month. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is ingrained in my memory. The first book we read, which was by the partner that started this thing with me, was American Sphinx, a biography on Jefferson. It was 576 pages. So one of the first things we decided at the end of the first meeting was you should shoot for something around 350 pages. We've had 2 notable situations that arose that got thumbs down. One was Wolf Hall. It's a popular book. A lot of book clubs read it. It was around 700 pages. And the other one was Grant, the General Grant, 900 pages. Everybody said, no, we're not going to read that book.
Yeah, so I do think having a page count is a really good idea. The other thing is, how do you determine genre? I believe that each person gets to pick, and this is why you have 1 meeting a month and 12 members. Each member gets to pick 1 book every year. Do you schedule that out in advance?
Yeah,
Tell us.
We don't Nan's book club. We had a professional, I think they had a college professor that led their book club in one of her book clubs, and he posted a 12-month schedule. Our group would probably have read the 12 books in 2 or 3 months, and you couldn't remember what it was. So we basically require the person that has the next month to come to the previous month meeting and say, here's the book. We knew last night what our July book is going to be. What has prevented us from having any major issues other than length is the fact that almost all of us are very physically conservative Republicans, but socially liberal Republicans. Now, we're not Republicans anymore. Most of us have gone independent in the last 8 years, but everybody is a self-assured, confident person, and they lead the book clubs in that way. What makes us successful, and having been at this for 28 years, is the commitment. We ask everybody just 2 things. You will have read the book, you will have made notes, you will come prepared to discuss the book, and you will be in attendance. If you're in Denver, you're in attendance. Several of us have second homes now. I, for one, come back the second Tuesday of every month and take care of a whole bunch of other stuff. I must add, when we were in Arizona for 4 years, we tried Zooming during COVID. Zooming just doesn't work very well. I think if you tried to have an electric version or internet version of this, I don't believe you could make it effective. You have to see faces, you have to see frowns and so forth. And I think you have to be there. So,
yeah. And so it sounds like you read a lot of biographies, but there's no limit on genre. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say we read a lot of biographies. We read about two-thirds of what we read is nonfiction and a third is fiction. It's just that whatever you've heard about. My source of books are my oldest son has PhD in literature. So, yeah, I just got 2 books for Father's Day. I wouldn't have picked out either one of those books, but he picked out books that he knew would interest me. One is a biography on Leopold, the Dutch king, and what he did in the Congo. And he knew that because I just read a book on the Congo. And then Nan's book club. Nan reads a book for the book club. And she probably reads at least 2 books a week. Some she knows I would like, and some she knows I would not like. And then the book club itself, we read things I would never read. The book we read last night was the one about one of the guards at the Metropolitan Museum, which made the New York Times bestseller list. And it was not something I'd ever even seen, and nor would I have picked it out had we not read it. But it was a great discussion. So,
okay, so you pick, let's say you were next month, you would have given the book last night at your book club. How do you prepare for a discussion, and how long is that discussion?
Well, you prepare for the discussion like you would prepare presenting. You read the book, you make copious notes, you have a schedule. Basically, what we do is, the first thing we do is we show up and start drinking wine. That's the social meeting. And generally that's at least 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes. We sit down to dinner. It's evolved into a complete 2 or 3 course meal now. The facilitator starts the discussion by generally making some comments about the book, and then it evolves into a discussion. We have great discussions, bringing up of numerous people. You never get everything out of reading a book if you read it by yourself. If you're in a group like we have, somebody comes up with something nobody else has thought about, and we'll delve into that. Our book club last night met for 2 hours. Generally, we meet for at least an hour and a half, and then occasionally 2 hours. And it's, it's a very, very interesting, very rigorous discussion.
So over dinner, would you say the entire discussion is about the book, or does it depend on the month? And sometimes there's less to say, and then you're just catching up as friends.
That depends on what else is going on in the world. But generally, we'll start out and have a good discussion of the book. And oftentimes, that segments out into a discussion about something else, something going on either in the city, the state, or the world. The facilitator's responsibility, if we get drawn apart from the discussion before we've really covered the discussion, the facilitator is responsible for getting us back on track. We've got some people that will start talking, and occasionally they need to be reined in. We've gotten where everybody kind of monitors themselves, but the facilitator, if there's somebody who hasn't said anything, it's up to the facilitator to bring in a person that hasn't chosen to speak or hasn't had an opportunity to speak. And that helps. So nobody feels like, well, I didn't get a chance to put my 2 cents in. So.
And you said that reading alone is very different from reading with your book club. I assume you are also you're a voracious reader, so you're reading in between your book club books. Can you talk a little bit about the difference in those experiences?
Well, if I read the book club book, I'm cognizant of the fact that we're going to have a discussion. So I'll either use Post-it notes and stick in the book with comments and questions or whatever, underline or whatever. So I go in prepared to discuss it. If I'm reading just for my own benefit, I don't do that. I mean, I've bought books from a lot of sources. One of them is thrift books, and those are used books. Occasionally, I'll get a book that somebody has underlined and yellow highlighted. No, so I don't do that for a book that I'm just reading for myself. So sometimes, depending on what it is, Nan and I will have a discussion about it. But that's just basically either reading for information or reading for enjoyment. One of the books that we read every year and meet with the author is about a game warden in Wyoming. And it's, one of the thrillers, pure fiction. Generally, I read books on subjects that either enlighten me or help me better understand or give me a better understanding of what's going on in the world. So,
did you say that you read that book every year?
Yes. Because I don't think there was another men's book club that I'd heard of. There certainly wasn't one in Denver. There certainly wasn't one that anybody knew about when we started ours. So we decided about the third or fourth meeting, I said, we ought to get the author to come to our book club. The first guy we decided to get was John Nichols of the Lago Beanfield War and others. Mm-hmm. He happened to be in Taos, about a 3-hour drive from here. So we got him lined up and we went down to Taos and had him meet with us. His parents were both card-carrying communists. He was a paranoid kind of a guy. In fact, I called him initially and said what I wanted him to do. He was very skeptical. It took 2 or 3 calls before he finally said, yeah, okay, I'll do this. So we show up, he comes and basically said, I really only have 30 minutes. He said, well, you guys know all about me, but I don't know anything about you. Why don't you guys tell me what you do? Well, the first guy to speak was Steve Barnett. He was a senior partner at Accenture. I think he was in their top 10 management group. He starts out, well, I'm with Accenture. And John said, well, what's Accenture? Nobody had ever asked Steve what Accenture was. Steve's trying to figure out, how can I explain Accenture in a few words to a guy that doesn't know anything? So we get into this thing, and an hour and 42 minutes later, Nichols is still talking and asking questions. And I finally said, John, this has been great, but we had dinner reservations 15 minutes ago. We were going to a restaurant as a group. So I said, you're welcome to join us. And he said, well, I have these dietary restrictions or whatever. Peter Heller, I don't know if you know that name, but he's met with us. He came to our Christmas dinner that includes the wives every year. In December, the wives all read the book, and whoever picks the book is cognizant of the fact we want something that's going to be interesting to the females in the group as well as the males. So, but Peter, he's been to 2 or 3 of our meetings. I'm sure we've had at least a dozen different people come to our book club meetings. Every August, this August on the 12th, we're going to go up to Saratoga, Wyoming, and meet with C.J. Box. C.J. Box came to our book club 18 years ago. From Saratoga, Wyoming to here, which is about, with no weather, it's 3.5 hours. He was blown away that we had a men's book club that was reading his books. He now has published about 28 or 30 books, and I've forgotten how many languages, but he still enjoys meeting with us once a year. In fact, I think he enjoys our meetings more than we do, so it's interesting.
Is he the one who wrote about the game warden?
He writes primarily about Joe Pickett, who is the game warden, but he's also written some basic fiction on mostly intrigue, kind of stuff. He started out as a paper reporter, and his books are actually continue to be very good. They are not great literature by any stretch of the imagination, but they're always page turners. So you can sit down with a 300-page book. And the last time I read, the new one I read it in 2 sittings. So
will you, in your book club in a year, will you read newer novels and also, traditional books that we as a society sort of revere? Is it sort of a mixture throughout the year?
Yeah. Generally, we read new stuff that's come out to great acclaim and so forth. But for instance, 2 months ago, we read James. I'd read James already. Nan had read James, gave it to me. So I went back and read Huckleberry Finn, I think the second or third time I read it. But I went back and read it to refresh myself before we read James, as did some others. I didn't think the book was that great. The rest of the guys thought it was really good. I was trying to think, and I can't remember now why the guy picked it. I think it might have been because it was by, who wrote Huckleberry Finn. So back
Okay.
when I was like 5 or 6, my dad read to my brother and I each night one chapter Tom Sawyer until we finished that, and then one chapter of Huckleberry Finn until we finished that. That was the first time I read it, and then I read it again for some reason, and then I went through it briefly before I read James. We have one guy that runs a very impressive financial services company. He brings in books on either investing or the economy or what's going wrong with the financial institutions in the United States and so forth. You can kind of guess what he's going to do. But right now, because he's the sponsor for the CJ Box thing, we don't read those anymore. So there's no one intriguing thing that comes forth on a regular basis. We started reading books about the American invasion of North Africa in World War II. And I think we read the 3 or 4 major books on that. If somebody picks up a subject matter and it's good and it kind of makes you want to hear more about it, then the next guy kind of picks up on that. It's not a rule or anything. It's just the way it happens. So.
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home, around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by design.
Yeah, interesting. You talked about how you've read a lot of books that you would never have read, and also about the wonderful friendship that you've built with these men over the year. Is there a particular experience or book that gave you sort of an unexpected, positive, meaningful experience?
I'm sure if you'd asked me the day after the club, I would have said yes. But we've read 340 books.
Wow.
At 340 books, it's kind of hard to remember, especially since I have trouble remembering what I had for breakfast these days. It's kind of hard to remember, what was the most surprising or powerful. Last night, for instance, we tend not to get into political discussions because that would kind of screw up the evening. So we don't do that.
You talked about how you tried to do this over Zoom during COVID and that didn't really work. I'm really interested because with the growth of AI, I suspect people will keep trying to create sort of these not in-person spaces to have book clubs. And you talked a little bit about you need to see how somebody's frowning or their facial expression. Or can you talk a little bit more about what you think are the secret ingredients? It may also be that it's not just an intellectual discussion, it's also a social gathering. So you're having, food and wine and sort of sharing the space together. But can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I can only speak for our 12 right now, but we have one guy that commutes to London on a regular basis. He basically, and he has a AI company startup, but he'll schedule his travel to try to be in Denver for our book club meetings. No more than a 60-year-old guy. You got to remember, this thing's been going on so long, most of us are old farts, So, I guess I see, so I'm not on any social media platforms. So that's my bias. And I've been, I had one of the public companies that I started and was running. I was the CEO and chairman. The president said, well, you got to get on to LinkedIn. And I said, I tell you what, you get on LinkedIn. If you don't have 150 emails in the next 2 days, I'll get on LinkedIn. The next day, I had 168 emails. So I don't think traditional third spaces, virtual or AI-based entities or groups or whatever. I don't see those. I don't ever see those being a good book club. I belonged into one. That was formed by a person at the Air Force Academy. It was a paid consultant that somebody at the Air Force Academy thought we need something that has the cadets and the graduates reading something so that they can have intellectual conversations about it. We didn't even have Zoom. We just had emails back and forth. And that lasted about 8 months. I only attended the first couple on the emails. I think what we get out of our book club is intellectual. It's absolutely social. Sometimes it's emotional. I mean, we've had people share things with our group that they couldn't share with their wives. I can't see how virtual or AI-based entities will ever be able to have that kind of benefit.
I agree with you. You said that you have this CEO who has the AI company is 60. You're 83. Is that the age range-ish of your book club?
Well, I mentioned that we've lost 4 members. I brought on a young guy that was on a foundation board with me who's now 55. So I knew him when he was probably 40. And he joined the foundation board as a guy because of some of his background experience. So when our last couple of guys died, I told him, you need to be the person that goes out and finds some younger guys that meet our criteria and so forth. So the first guy he brought on is a political consultant that basically consults for candidates and parties in the state, which is pretty unique. And then the second guy he brought on is this guy that goes back and forth to London who has an AI-based company. He introduced me to him when I was looking for somebody to help with Google advertising for one of the companies that I had. So I've worked with him about 10 years ago when our last guy, actually we had 4 guys die. We have 1 now that's in a memory care unit. So he came in to replace that guy and adds a whole new dimension. We range from 55 to the Accenture guy is a year or 2 older than I am. So that's the bookends. Most of us are right around 76 to 80 plus. So
do you think that having that age range is actually a huge benefit because you get diversity of thought and experience?
The young guys especially comment every meeting on how great it is to be able to hear the war stories and the battles and so forth for guys that have been around a long time doing things. As a Fortune 500 CEO, I've experienced things that not too many people have. And it seems like invariably something comes up. This book on one of the guards at the Met. Everybody except one person, I think, had been to the Met at least once. When I was working in New York City, the Met, every time a new program came out, the Met brought in the CEO roundtable group, which I was part of. And so we got to go to every one of the Met openings, which was, a super deal, and sharing some of those kind of stories and so forth. I think the young guys, as I mentioned, they comment invariably every meeting about something. It was, that's really interesting. I'm glad you shared that kind of thing. The rest of us have been together so long, I don't think there are too many surprises that we're not really learning anything. We're just having a good time. We have 4 of us we play golf together. We all belong to different clubs, so we do home and away golf trips. The thing when we go up to Wyoming, we all spend at least a couple of nights up there. And a lot of the wives go up also. Nan likes to fly fish, so she goes up and fly fishes. So I just can't emphasize enough that the personal gatherings, perhaps more than anything else, is the most important thing about this thing.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions I like to ask every guest. But before I do that, I wanted to just sort of recap. So for your book club, you have 12 members. Every member chooses 1 book a year. That member is responsible for preparing for and leading the discussion. Your book clubs range from 1.5 to 2 hours in length, which includes social time, a nice dinner. It's not all just talking about the book, but it is predominantly talking about the book and other world events. The things that I heard were, You are a voracious reader, and I'm guessing that everyone in the book club loves to read. So being a reader, and also in the case of your book club, being a leader in a field seems like it really has helped the book club, one, stay together, and two, be, productive and meaningful. You also have set a page limit of around 350 pages. But other than that, you don't have a lot of rules other than being committed to reading the book, coming prepared to the meeting, and choosing a book that you've read. Is there anything else I've missed that makes your book club successful, or that you think is a critical ingredient for having a successful book club?
One thing is more important than anything else, and that is confidentiality. I mean, as I mentioned, we've had guys talk about things their wives don't know about. Confidentiality, although we don't beat it to death, it's pretty well understood. If it's not about the book, if it's personal, and as I said, after 18 or 28 years, there's a lot of personal things shared. Confidentiality is absolutely critical.
I don't know why I didn't ask you this. Do you have a name for your book club?
No. We started out and somebody came up with Silver Streaks. But somebody else said, well, what the crap? We don't need a book club name. We're a book club.
And one other question. The books you choose every year, are they books you have already read, or are they books you want to read? Like every year when you choose a book, is it a book you haven't read or a book you already have read?
I always choose a book that I've read. But, well, first of all, you have to, if it's the book club book, you have to have read it before you can make it the book club book. So, but what I do is, knowing the book club as I do, and I probably read at least 3 books a month. The books that I read that I think would be interesting to the book club are the ones that I generally pick. So.
Okay. Is there any last thing about your book club that you want to share that you think listeners could learn from in creating their own book club?
Start their own book club?
Yeah.
I think the main thing is that you basically need to stress that a successful book club has to have committed members. I mean, if people don't come having read the book, not only just read it, but having made notes and had questions or comments or suggestions, if they haven't done that, you're not going to have meaningful discussions. And I can't imagine that would last very long. I mean, if this was just a come in and go home, it wouldn't have lasted a year, I don't think so.
Right. I mean, such amazing lessons. And I wonder, do you know if there are other longstanding men's books now? I know you think you were probably one of the first, but have you heard of other ones?
There's still none in Denver because we have a waiting list. I bet we have at least 8 or 10 people that have said, geez, if you ever have an opening, we'd really love to join your book club.
As we explore in my brand, Amatand, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can tie us to the past, enable us to enjoy the present, or even take us into the future. And I know you have so much beautiful art in your home, so I'm not sure if this will be one of your answers, but can you share an object from your life, whether it's something you still have or not, that holds a lot of meaning for you, and tell us why?
An object? Yeah. My class ring, my Air Force Academy class ring. I have a beautiful ring with a blue star sapphire in it, and I wear it every day. It's an attachment to my classmates that graduated in my class from the academy, but it also reminds me that the smartest decision I ever made in my whole life was for the wrong reasons. And the only reason I came to the academy was it was free, and I got $25 a month. Had I not done that, first of all, I would not have met Nan because I was in pilot training when she was 20 miles away at Texas Tech. And marrying her, I used to say marrying her was the smartest decision. And she corrected me and said, no, going to the academy was the smartest because that's how we met and so forth. Used to fly a lot more. And back then, a lot of guys from the academy would go into the airlines once they got out if they wanted to keep flying forever. And I would always look in the cabin to see who was sitting in the pilot's position and the first officer. And oftentimes you'd see a class ring. I used to sit on the jump seat. I used to go from JFK to Miami every week for about 10 months when I went through Atlanta. And when I got on the plane in Atlanta, I'd go up and sit on the jump seat between the pilots and talk to them because the pilot in command was a classmate that I knew. So, of course, you can't do anything near that anymore. But I guess the class ring, if I had to pick an object, that's the only object that I would pick that I would say has a lot of meaning for me.
Okay, that's a wonderful story. Can you share a favorite tradition? It could be something from when you were a child, something you do with Nan or did with the kids when they were growing up, anything in between, any tradition at all.
I would say the only tradition we have as a family is sports and exercise. Coming along, I coached baseball and basketball, and when my kids were young, all of our vacations were skiing or whatever. We bought 2 of the first snowboards ever. The first bike trip we went on was with our 2 sons. Nan and I went to Germany. And today, you go on a trip with us, you do anything, it's basically sports. Unfortunately, we can't do a lot of things we used to do, but we like to stay active.
That's amazing. You already talked about how you feel like the gathering for the book club is the most important thing. Do you and Nan enjoy entertaining in your home? Why or why not?
Yeah, we thoroughly enjoy it. We have a round table in our dining room, as you remember, which everybody likes because you sit at that, there are 4 couples sit at that table, and we have great discussions. We have 2 Canadians, and then the rest of us are Americans, but the Canadians live here. We all live within a couple of miles of each other, and we get together regularly. Nan and I like to bring in other people. We very seldom ever have big entertaining groups anymore because you don't get to chat and talk and so forth. We thoroughly enjoy, one of our favorite things to do, as a matter of fact.
Do you have 1 or 2 top books that you can recommend to listeners? They could be books you've read for book club or not. It could just be the most recent standout book. We love to give listeners book recommendations.
Remember, I said 340 books. And plus the other 700 or 800. James was my book this year.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Last question. What do you do for yourself? I mean, you read, I know you play golf, but do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or a daily routine that contributes to your well-being that you've used along the years to contribute to your success?
Well, at 83, my focus is on continuing to be as physically active as I possibly can. I've always enjoyed sports. Nan and I were big runners. At age 45, I had to quit running because of knee issues. At 50, I had to quit playing tennis singles because of knee issues. At 60, I had to quit mountain climbing. Nan and I climbed 28 of their 52 14,000-foot peaks in the state. She kept on going, and I had to quit. So I'm down to biking and golf and pickleball. So I work out in the gym a couple of times a week, and I play pickleball twice a week. I play golf twice a week. And Nan and I do, when we're in the mountains especially, we get out in the mountains to hike. And here we go to a couple of different parks to walk. So that's kind of my routine. If you'd have told me I was going to live to be 83 when I was 60, I would have said, no way.
Yeah,
Right.
We'll take it, right? Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, Hugh. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, it's a really special book club, and I think there's so much people can learn from it. And I hope that they do, and that they continue to, and that book clubs continue to thrive in this era of social media and sort of quick reads and people not diving deep. And I think we need this in our lives.
Right. Well, thank you for doing this. What caused you to focus on book clubs?
Well, like you, I'm a voracious reader, and I've never been able to create a really meaningful book club. So I am personally learning, and I've learned a lot from this discussion on what are the ingredients that make for a meaningful book club. My goal is to create a book club that's as amazing as your book club. And I think there are a lot of listeners who are seeking that as well. I mean, we're all, whether we're conscious of it or not, we're all seeking meaning and more meaning in our lives. And I think this is one way to satisfy that if we can do it effectively.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our show helps us to continue to make quality episodes. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. On the Table with Ashley is presented by Amatond, an elevated, everyday, luxury home and tableware brand with products designed to cultivate connection. You can learn more about Amatond at ametendre.com or on Instagram at Amatond. By subscribing to our newsletter on the Amatond website, you'll receive updates on new episodes as well as promotions relating to Amatond and Amatond's products. Send us an email at reachoutanytime@amatond.com if you have ideas for guests or series ideas you'd like to pass along. Thanks for listening.